like your soul. I like your soul.
Hello everyone, welcome back to my show. It's me, Andreia, on Beyond the Cover on Dreamcatcher Radio. My 43rd episode this week. And today, because we're going to discuss about the fantasy genre, I'm going to bring, at least I try to bring a lot of epic music and also from other medias as well, not just music, but I've mentioned you once in the last week, which is Two Steps from Hell. I know this sounds a little bit because of the title, Two Steps from Hell. Okay, what does it mean? Doesn't matter. So, be ready to listen a lot of epic songs, but also some darker tones as well. Because I also going to bring some from other, let's say, video games on the darker fantasy genre, so I hope you're gonna like it. And before we listen our first Two Steps from Hell song, let's now start as usual with the questions and observations for this week. And the first one comes from Pom from Lincolnshire, and he says, I would love to come on your show and discuss prison stories. I have a book coming out soon. Well, Paul, you're already invited. And I know Bradley has your contact, so we're going to contact very soon. So you're going most welcome, and let's have some fun and also discuss your book about the prison. So let's see what it's all about. And then, of course, I'm going to be in contact with you. So yes, Paul, you're more than welcome to come to my show. My second, this is it's a question actually. It comes from Debbie from Lincolnshire, and she asks, I want to write a book, something about politics, but along with the lines of the TV series Yes, Minister. Any ideas, suggestions? Well, Debbie, I am not familiar with the series Yes, Minister. I will say if you have to think about the genre, your book, what it is about. And I'm going to ask this because I'm going to say it again, I don't really know which genre is Yes, Minister, even though it is a TV series. Just think about the genre and then see, I will say, TV series closer to that one, how they approach the theme. And you can get inspiration from politics in the real world. And make up your own world. Also depends if your world is a fantasy, of course. I'm not sure. Again, I'm not sure. So, but yeah, I'll say CTV series similar to the Yes, Minister. See probably the politics in the real world. To see how they can connect or make some connections, similarities with your book, so you get inspiration from. You can just also, find other. It's very difficult, but it's very interesting. Really, thank you so much for bringing out for this one. But politics, maybe non-books about the politics, maybe I will say. But then again, this is just my suggestions, but you have to know what works for you the best. And again, what is the genre of the book you're writing? That probably I will start from there. The genre, and then see what comes with the genre close to the TV series that you mentioned, which is Yes, Minister, and then you can start with that. That will be my approach. Or if you don't want to come with TV series or something like that, you can just listen to music. Probably, I don't know. If you know at some point there's some prime ministers or favorite songs, you can listen to the inspiration. I don't know. I don't know, there's a lot of things you can go with this, maybe, but yeah, pardon me. I will start first, again, with the theme, then see TV series closer to the Yes, Minister, and then you can start to see politics in real life, just to get some inspiration, and then, again, if this could be non-fiction, could help you, maybe, so I'll start for that. And that is my recommendation. Now the next question is a very interesting one. And there's a very interesting one because there's a very it could be its own discussion on its own self. But I'm going to try to be simple as much as I possible. So it says, so Jackie from St. Albans asks, I says, I'm a black woman, educated. I listen to your show, but you don't talk about black people. Is there any reason why? Yes, it is, Jackie. I'm going to tell you why. It's very simple. First of all, it's because I'm not a black person myself. And I never experienced what is to be one. And because of that, imagine if I wanted to try to talk about being a black person. It could become like being a pretentious, you know. And I don't want it to be that way. And also because I don't have the experience myself. And because I'm not a black woman myself, I may give a false information for those who are listening to me as well. Another point is as well that I have actually mentioned some stuff about black people on my show. For example, on young adults section, when we discovered about what makes young adults whatever the type of themes, I mentioned this, and I'm going to quote this what I've said. Young adult has also led the large on diversity books. Is in the young adults where you will find the most BIPOC, which means, translation is, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, queer, trans, and disabled protagonists, and third characters than any other age of group. So, because I'm not a black woman myself, Jackie, because I don't have an experience, the best I can do is to say, hey, you have this type of information that can include black people on this. In this case, young adults, which is the more prominent one. Or I can quote as well examples of books of black people as well. That's my approach. It's not because I'm against black people. It's not because, you know, oh, you should not be talking about them. No, I think we should discuss about everything. But because the show as well is about literature and books and writing, that can be already included if you think about it. I may not mention it, but it's already included. So, for example, today we're going to discuss about fantasy. There are, as far as I can remember, but I don't remember the names, but I know that I think there are 2 black fantasy writers. And I think that's great. I mean, more people of color are just come out and saying, I have this fantastic idea. I have this amazing culture which allows me to write, you know, these characters and these gods. And I know African culture and the gods, you know, they are there because one of my characters of my book is actually from African culture. I'm telling you that as well. And I'm trying to do my research as best as I can, even though I'm not a black person, but I try my best. So, but talking about them, I think requires a lot of sensibility. Do you understand? And because I don't have that experience, and I don't want to give the false information for people, it's not that I don't talk about it. I just mention books that people can go out and research. And even if I don't talk about the books of black authors, you yourself, you can go out and go out. For instance, are you interested to listen to fantasy genre? Listen to my show today, and then go out and see African. I'm pretty sure they are out there. African authors, they write fantasy books. Again, which ones are? You discover yourself. Is your journey as a reader. I am hoping that I answered your question. I hope I did. And honestly, I'm very glad you asked this question. It's very, very important to ask these questions. Very important to say, I am a black person, I'm a black woman, in this case you are, and what you talk more about us, Yeah, sometimes I know it's not my place because I'm not a black people, so, you know, for me it's a very sensitive topic. And because of nowadays internet and people being, let's say, very overwhelming in their opinions, can overwhelm me, myself as a person. And I'm very sensitive to that kind of thing. So I just want to at least say, hey, this is going to be this topic today. and then let the curiosity of people go out and buy a book, the author they want to read, of course, and then if there is an author that is a black person, fantastic. Let's read that. Let's put out there and say, hey, everyone on the internet, you can do it as well. Say, hey, this is a black author which is writing this book with the African culture. Yeah, bring it on. Do that. I think it's fantastic. It's amazing. And I think people deserve more to know more about that. Deserve to know more. So yes, these are my 3 questions. I want to thank Paul, Debbie, and Jackie. Thank you so much for the questions, guys. And those who listen to me, keep sending your questions about again, literature, book, writing, and you can be a writer yourself. And if you would like to be in touch with me, get an interview, even if you are in your stage of in polishing the work, we'll discuss about your book. Let me know. Go for thedreamcatcher.co.uk and then send us an email and you can get in touch. Now, yes, let's start listening to our songs. As I said, 2 Steps from Hell. These guys are amazing, are my favorite. And they really put that fantasy genre so well. It's always so epic and amazing, and I love them. This is ICs from 2 Steps from Hell. How are you feeling, guys? Are you feeling epic and the epic, hero or epic adventure that goes out of their, out of their house and just go out there and live their lives? I feel very, very hyped. And because of that, I'm going to introduce the next song of the Two Steps from Hell before we start our show. And it's on the same epicness they always bring to their music. And it's just so amazing. I love to listen to this guy. So, so cool. So, for that, I'm going to bring you Two Steps from Hell, Archangel. Well, Two Steps from Hell, Archangel. That's everything I need to say. Just please, when you have time, YouTube, Two Steps from Hell. Listen, they are absolutely bombastic and amazing, as you can already see from two introductions I just gave today. Now, yes, let's start from our show. On the last week, we saw the sci-fi genre, and we just come across that to write the sci-fi, we need to ask the big question, and this means try to imagine a future of our time or reimagining of some other periods of time. You can imagine, for example, a sci-fi version of medieval, I don't know, something like that, and it has to be questioned what we include with what ifs, and this is the excitement part of writing sci-fis. We also saw that exists as well the hard science fiction and the soft science fiction. And on the hard science fiction is mostly what is most connected with scientific stuff, and this can also include chemistry, physics, or astronomy, for example, and also how characters use science to solve problems, and how the science laws or technological innovations also works as well. Soft science, it can be more connected to the characters' emotions, clarify scientific details, for example, or even dealing with psychology, political science, and anthropology, for example. And of course, we also saw in a very brief moment As well, tips to write sci-fi characters as well, compelling sci-fi characters, to give the conflict as well they deserve, to the plot journey as well. It set up the scene as well, and then we saw a lot of things at the setup scene. I'm going to remember that it was build the world around of your big what if. Make it make sense. Don't abuse the privilege of working in imaginative genre. And Deus Ex Machina. We're gonna to briefly talk about this as well today if we have time on the fantasy genre as well. And this means that it is mostly a term used to explain a storytelling technique where a character's conflict is solved by a sudden appearance of a new character or an impossible event. This means that it solves everything but possible. So, and now, because I started just to pump out my audience with epic music to feel almost like a hero that goes to an adventure. Now, yes, the most, if not most popular genre of literature, fantasy. So now, fantasy, like science fiction, fantasy explores imaginary worlds and or societies, but while science fiction uses real scientific concepts for explaining the extraordinary, fantasy inspires wonder with magical, mythological, or supernatural elements. Writing with the fantasy genre requires a lot of world building, including magic systems, complete with laws and limitations. I can confirm this because on my book, my book series, I had to create an entire magic system. It implies limitations, what my characters are allowed to do, what cannot allowed to do, and what makes impossible, for example, or makes possible as well. And remember, this whole has to be connected with the plot, connected with everything around. And we'll discuss, for example, around fauna, if you guys remember about the fauna and the things physical, and about threshold, etc., etc. This is all connected. This world building you guys build up in your story is what makes your fantasy readers like, oh my god, this is fantastic, I want more of this. I'm so intrigued by this detail, what this character's going to now learn and read about this god. This thing's so forbidden and it's in there on the touch, but you want your readers to absolutely just be intrigued about your book, and that's what matters. And now, once you know what the fantasy genre is, so then how to write fantasy novel? Because you might think it is easy. Well, that depends. It depends. I mean, it can be, it cannot be. Of course, for the first who are starting at the beginning, it might be overwhelming because you have to come up with, with rules and the laws, etc. The magic system, the world building. For example, you have to also realize timelines as well of the events of our characters, what they've changed, what they have changed. This is a lot of work, and I have done that myself, and I still haven't finished that yet. Again, because I am a very detailed maniac. I just probably I think my details will just come up with novellas of their own. But anyway, but you can see it involves a lot of work. I'm gonna see why. So, while fantasy is a great adventure and the favorite genre among readers, there you go, writing a fantasy book isn't easy, especially if you're just beginning your writing career. There you go. I am starting my writing as a fantasy writer, but I had a background as a fanfic writer. So that helped me to understand, world building of my favorite, what I was writing, understanding characterization for other characters that I like. And that can actually help. For beginners, yes, it's going to be overwhelming, as I said. But it's part of the journey that you are as a writer, and embrace it. Or if you think it really is really overwhelming, step back and just watch stuff to get inspiration, for example. That's fine as well. So the scope of fantasy books ranges from large to outright enormous. No matter how you slice it, the fantasy genre forces its writers to harness our imagination and create things that have never existed before, all while making them seem real. And that's the absolutely fantastic thing about fantasy writing. You know it's fantasy. You know it does not exist. But because you as a writer, you create it, you give it life, and it's going to make real for the readers. They're going to already imagining the stuff that you created. And this is amazing. Because you make it so real, in a sense that, yes, it's fantastical, doesn't exist, but for this world is real, it does exist. It is what you really want as a fantasy writer. I want it as well. I want for my cosmic series to be feel real for the reader when they read. I want them to feel ingrained with the world building and the fantasy around that. I want it as well. This is why many of fantasy writers really, they craft the skills and the stuff and make it this possible. I think it's absolutely fantastic. So, if you aren't sure where to start or just need some help bringing your fantasy story to life, now let's see what we're going to cover, which is going to be the basics of the fantasy genre, including subgenres, how you can learn from fantasy for the great fantasy authors as well, building fantasy worlds, crafting compelling characters as well. Again, you're going to listen some stuff repetitive, but keep in mind it's very essential for you as a writer. And telling the I will say perfect story. The word perfect makes like you have to force to make a perfect story. Now just make a good story. And remember, no story is perfect by any means. You can like a story or a sort of video game and still flawed in it. So you can start to pick up what the flaws starting to feel. But that's okay, because what matters is the experience we're having. So, what makes fantasy? So, before we can dive too deep into what all these elves, wizards, dragons, and everything in between, we need to know the genre we are writing. So now, let's understand this part. So, defining the fantasy genre as it is. So, a fantasy story is one that incorporates magical, supernatural, or mythological elements in ways that cannot be explained with our current knowledge or with knowledge we may feasibly attain. And this is true. So, if you think about it, when you are creating something that doesn't exist, it just doesn't exist. It doesn't even have to make sense. Let's imagine that you create a world that all your characters have this mushroom-like skin color, or even they have this, mushrooms hats, like, you imagine now a mushroom, right? That could be your story, and that could be your world. And now you have to explain why your characters have this type of body. What makes them special? What are the powers? If they have powers at all, they could be more rooted to nature. If they root more to nature, what abilities they have, etc., etc., etc. And we know this makes no sense, but in the context of fantasy, it makes sense. Now, this was clearly in a very probably weird way. So, but there are two parts of that definition. The first claims that your story involves some sort of magical, supernatural, or mythological element. Magic or the fantastical are all marks of the genre. The second part is important too. Those elements are unexplainable, based on your current understanding of things, of your plausible definition helps you stir. Hold on, I'm not doing this. Okay, so I'm going to pause a little bit because I think I just a little bit. I'm getting too enthusiastic about this again. It's a genre that I am writing, so I get enthusiastic. So my next song is going to be from actually still in fantasy genre, from a video game. Is very popular. It's League of Legends, but I think again this music, it's epic and it brings what the country really is. It's Demacia Rising. So guys, without further ado, from League of Legends a soundtrack, Demacia Rising. Well, that was League of Legends soundtrack, The Marcia Rising. Again, it brings that happiness and also what the Marcia is in League of Legends world is, which is this very, society that is honor, justice, and nice and stuff. But then they are against magic. They are anti-magic, which is a very interesting stuff, and I think this makes the brilliance of that fantastical country that the creators, the writers of League of Legends created. So my next song is from another video game as well, and your story doesn't necessarily always have to be happy. It can be emotional, and it can be reflective when time comes in all stories. So for my next song, I will bring a song from the Elder Scroll. I think it's 6 or 5. It's one of the things, and it's Oblivion. The song is Oilers Ascension. I'm gonna be honest, I never played the game, but the music is very beautiful. It's almost like nostalgic and emotional, and I think also deserves to be on the fantasy genre. So guys, again, the Elder Scrolls, Oblivion, Aurelius, and Ascension. Well, this was Elder Scrolls Oblivion, Oil's Ascension. I was kind of already emotional because it's just such an amazing soundtrack. And to think about the character's ascension to something. I don't know what it is, don't ask me. I never played it, I never played the game. But it brings a sense for me, especially nostalgia, back in time. I don't know, feelings that way. But for those that have played, I hope I did at least, this game just used to bring this music. So let's now return to our show. So we start to see fantasy as a genre, and it's the most popular one, no doubt about it. And we just see that fantasy, it's what the title implies. It doesn't exist. You made up with stuff. You can create whatever laws you want, magic systems, societies, countries, names, races, you name it, everything. And that's what it matters. It doesn't need to make sense. Because in contrary with the sci-fi, which relies a lot on scientific stuff, fantasy is pure imagination. Pure imagination. And we start to see what makes fantasy the fantasy. And I'm going to read what I was supposed to read correctly, so I'm going to start it again. So we just come to the conclusion that fantasy is fantasy, and it doesn't need to be explained. It's just what it is. So there are two parts to that definition of the fantasy. The first claims that your story involves some sort of magical, supernatural, or mythological element. Magic or the fantastical are all marks of the genre. The second part is important too. Those elements are unexplainable based on your current understanding of the things, or our plausible future understanding of things. Adhering to both parts of this definition helps you steer clear of science fiction and stay in the awesome realm of fantasy. If your fantasy can be explained by human species, could be explained by genetic manipulation, for example, that is only a century away, it's not really supernatural. So, as you can see, I think it's pretty well explained that fantasy, it's fantasy. It doesn't need explanation. If there's some explanation, make up one. Doesn't matter what it is. The alphas now are zombies, explain, make up with the reason why. Or humans are involved to some kind of alien thing that's still on the fantasy genre, not necessarily sci-fi. Make up with the reason why. It's our world. You made up your stuff, and then the readers gonna see what it is and what it's about. So now, yes, the fantasy subgenres. And this is where I think it's really, really interesting as well, because there's some, and people are also starting to, because we writers we start with the genre, but then some made up in a way as well. So it makes it interesting to see how many subgenres of fantasy exist. So the fantasy is a part of the larger category of speculative fiction. It is a massive genre itself. Even with its own boundaries, there are subgenres that are largely different from one another. But understanding your subgenre is just as, if not more important, than understanding your large genre as well. So, now the most popular one, high or epic fantasy. So, are usually interchangeable terms to describe your traditional fantasy stories that are huge in scope. Those fantasy stories can have complete worlds, religions, history, languages, races, and political systems, and usually involve large quests, a varied cast of characters, and alone. The most well-known books in the genre are Tolkien's Lord of the Rings series. If you will think about it, it is the most popular book ever. For the elements that I just mentioned: worlds, religions, history, languages, races, political systems, etc., etc., very cast of characters, etc., etc. And it's a starting point. It can be your starting point, but then you can just move away from it and see what you can do as well. Because see, every time elves, orcs, etc., and the list goes on, it can become a bit predictable. And then you can say, okay, it's my starting point, but then see what I can do with this. Let's just do a little twist here and see how it goes. And the next genre as well is low / urban fantasy. So, another interchangeable terms with urban fantasy becoming the more common term in recent years. And if you remember, I interviewed a self-published author with a urban fantasy book as well, which is very interesting interview. Stories in this genre take place in the real world, or something very similar to a real world, but with fantasy elements incorporated. Often, but not always, our protagonist discovers the magical aspect of the world through their journey. And now, the other genre is paranormal romance. So it's a blend of low fantasy and romance. In most cases, the main romance arc of the story involves a human character and a supernatural character, with one or both coming to understand the other's world. As with all romance, these stories need a happy ending. So, for you guys out there that want to write paranormal romance, remember this. The romance is between a human and a supernatural being, and has to have a happy ending. And also they come to understand each other's world as well. And now the fantasy romance. The genre combines high fantasy with romance. I think it's called romance, if I'm not mistaken. That's the term. Unlike paranormal romance, the stories exist in a world entirely of your own creation, borrowing the vast world building of epic fantasy. Remember, romance is a core subplot of this genre, but it is still usually epic, fantasy first and foremost. So, if you want to write a fantasy romance, but I will say romancy as well, just remember that it's still a world building, it still has to be epic and fantastical, and the romance is just a subplot in the story. And I have to see here. I haven't reached that yet. So, my next song, let's see from my thing. Oh, yes, it could be this one, definitely. This is absolutely amazing as well. Oh, yes. So, this next song is again from another video game. I'm sorry, you guys have to bear with me with video games right now because this is what it is. So, I played this game more than 2 and 3 times. It was amazing. I love to be a Grey Warden and meeting all these characters and romancing my absolutely naughty elf. Yes. Yes, I'm saying this. Zevran is amazing. It's amazing elf. So, Dragon Age Origins, the theme. So, guys, let's listen to this epic music as well. And guys, that was the absolutely amazing soundtrack of Dragon Age Origins, the Grey Warden's theme. And because we've been on these epic musics and one emotional scene of Ascensions of somebody, why not going back to be a little hobbit? You know, the simple life, you know, having kids or children, or, you know, even be in your, you know, these very cute and adorable houses. So guys, let's listen the Shire from, you know, Lord of the Rings. Well, how about that? Maybe some of you expected this, some of you not, but this is what you're gonna feel today in fantasy genre. I'll make you feel like a little hobbit, you know, adventurer or even hero, or maybe a villain, or perhaps a grey protagonist, because I'm going to bring as well the dark fantasy genre here as well. So we just finally start to see the genres here, and the higher epic fantasy, I'm going to say it again, as traditional fantasy stories that are huge in scope. They have complete worlds of religions, history, languages, races, and political systems that involve a large quest, a variety of cast of characters, and usually these stories are long in terms of sequels and prequels, etc. The low or urban fantasy, it's a type one that just has urban in that, so it is in a place in the real world or similar, but with fantasy elements incorporated. The paranormal romance, it blends low fantasy and romance. The main romance arc of the story involves a human character and a supernatural character, with one or both coming to understand each other's worlds, and they need a happy ending. And we stopped on the fantasy romance, which I probably will call romancy as well at this point. So The thing is, this still has high fantasy, but it has romance. And pardon me again, romance is a core subplot of the genre. But it's still usually epic fantasy first and foremost. Now, let's see the others next to it as well. So, young adult and juvenile fantasy are two different subgenres marked by their target audience. Young adult fantasy will usually feature teenage protagonists set in another fantasy subgenre, while juvenile fantasy will have children protagonists. Make sure your tone, theme, and pacing are all appropriate for the target audience. And if you have remembered, we saw this when I dive deeper into young adult and juvenile as well. The how to create books for these target audiences. Fairy tale retellings are new takes on classical fairy tales. What if Sleeping Beauty could dream walk? What if the dwarves were protecting the outside world from Snow White? Put your own twist on otherwise similar fairy tale. And I remember, yes, this is fairy tale retelling is becoming another genre on itself. And I do not consume those, to be fair. But it seems very interesting. How can you still have the characters of the original fairy tale, but just give it a bit of a twist? And I think that's a very interesting way to approach the story. Historical fantasy is a combination of historical fiction and fantasy, giving us an alternative form of real historical events. If there was magic, orcs, etc. In this subgenre, you must pay particular attention to details. And the other reason this subgenre is looking for accuracy in the non-fantasy elements, of course. So again, in historical fantasy, if you're going to write one, yes, be accurate on the details, but of course, have these elements of fantastical as well. Now, grimdark takes a happy fantasy and does away with all those uptight heroes and knights. Instead, this subgenre uses anti-heroes and characters with questionable morals to contrast the usual tropes of fantasy stories. And then the next is dark fantasy. It combines elements of horror with fantasy, bringing in the horrific creatures and a chilling atmosphere to unsettle the reader while providing that fantasy fix. It's dark, gritty, and, in this author's humble opinion, at least those who write this article, the best fantasy genre. Well, this could be, this is on, you have your own opinion, of course. This is just, admittedly, yeah. So as you can see from this, I will say green dark fantasy can coexist in a way, because I'm writing a dark fantasy myself, so I'm using what says here, which is really it is a horror and fantasy as well, creatures, horrific creatures. Cosmic beings has to be, horrific creatures. But yes, usually these two are very close, but are not the same, as you could just listen to me everything here. Let me see the other genres. And for the genres, this is pretty much what you need to know. So I'm going to remind you again. The subgenres of fantasy are high or epic fantasy, low urban fantasy, paranormal romance, which I call at this point again romancy, young adult and juvenile fantasy, fairy tale retellings, historical fantasy, grim dark fantasy, and dark fantasy. If somebody out there wants to come up with a new genre, I'm all happy to, to listen in the future, who knows. But this is, thus far, what we have at the moment. And you can already see it's a big, massive category on its own. So now, if you remember, next part is learn from the good authors. And I think this is really, really important. Because when you have a book on the shelf, you are reading, as another author as well, you get inspired from other authors. And you start to pick up what they are doing in their book. To pick up the tropes, pick up the plot lines, pick up the characters' motivations, etc., etc. So, for the love from the good authors, the best writers are avid readers. If you want to write awesome fantasy stories, you should be reading awesome fantasy stories. With a mix of authors who help define the genre and those who continue to do so. Need quick suggestions? Well, this will be a list of authors that I pick up from the place I pick up, of course, these all these things. I'm going to say, pick your one author you have on your shelf and read the book. You have the book for a reason. Remember that. If it's a good inspiration, go for it. Just dive deeper into. Of course, if you really want what other people really say to take note, for example, J.R. Tolkien, or for example, Brandon Sanderson, for example, I don't know, like Barongo or Patrick Ruffles, I don't know, Tasha Suri, George R. R. Tolkien. Not talking, no, George Martin, I'm sorry. No, I'm just, oh my gosh, I'm going already. Yeah, so, this is just examples. You don't need to read these books. You may be surprised, many people don't like George R. R. Tolkien. They just don't like. And that's okay. Because these books, while really good, and while they are of the time, maybe for everybody, that's okay. Again, I'm going to say it again. If you like it, read and try to understand why they made so popular, and not popular, but how they make it an interesting world that inspires you as an author as well. So, another way to learn from the good authors is you can also check out the bestsellers in your subgenre, and there are all the books there. However you choose to read, and make sure you read a lot of variety, take note of their world choice, how they write action scenes, their world building, how they handle magic, their characters' arcs, and what makes the world best for you. As artists and creators, your work is a combination of everything we consume, and it's true. The things that you have in your shelf is stuff that you personally consume, and probably you want to get inspiration from. For give an example for me, I don't have just J.R.R. Tolkien, and also J.R.R. Martin. I've also, let me see if I can pronounce it, because I think he's a Polish author, Andrzej Sambrowski, something like this. He is the author of The Witcher, for example. You want another example? I'll give another example. I also have Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hood, for example. Or, if you want another example besides high fantasy or fantasy, I have an Uber fantasy, Stormfront by Jim Butcher, for example. I just started reading the book. I finished last 2 weeks. Last year or 2 years, something like that. And so on, so on, so on, and so on. And this is what these as writers, you need to do. We need to read a lot, the genre that we want to write, to understand. Because I am, for example, writing dark fantasy. I need to read dark fantasy books. For example, with me to read Promise of Blood by Brian McClellan. There you go. It's an example. And what a better way to start for my next song to be from a dark fantasy video game again. There's going to be a lot of video games. So, this song in particular, it strikes in your emotions. It strikes so much for what the game is about. Bloodborne is the game. It's dark fantasy with Lovecraftian stuff. It's weird. It's amazing. I loved it. Again, I haven't played the game, but for what I have saw the other players do and explain the story, it's just amazing. It's just so interesting. And the song is called Hunter's Dream. So, without wasting more time, Bloodborne, Hunter's Dream. This song always breaks my heart. It really describes so well the world of Bloodborne and how your protagonist, you're just a hunter, just wake up from a dream in codes. It just evokes so much and makes that melancholy and sadness of your situation as the hunter that goes out hunting other beasts. My next song is from actually a game I am recently playing, and I'm really enjoying it for what it is. It has its flaws, but I'm enjoying it nevertheless. And it is from D&D actually. And it's called The Legacy of Baal. And this is from the Baldur's Gate 3 video game. So, it's still on that fantasy subgenre. But I promise after this, we're going to give more probably atmospheric a little bit as well. Because I have very good music as well to play here. So, guys, from the Baldur's Gate 3's original soundtrack, The Legacy of Baal. Well, that was Baldur's Gate 3 soundtrack. The Legacy of Baal. And now let's keep going with our show as well. So we just finished the genres right now. We saw the adult juvenile fantasy, the fairy tale retellings, the historical fantasy, the grimdark fantasy, and the dark fantasy. And we also come to the conclusion that for us to also learn this, not just know at least the principles and stuff, but also to see how other authors do, we need to also see how the good authors also do this stuff as well. And for that, we need to read books. That's the only way we can do as writers. Because remember, I think there is a quote from another author. He's not a fantasy author, but I think he writes mystery and stuff. I think he says that, and I think he says, even if you don't, it is something like to do with if you yes. If you read, you are secretly a writer. So this, I think, is a very interesting code, as I remember. Just keep in mind for you to keep reading. So another thing we need to keep in mind as well is to know our target. So no matter what subgenre you decide to write, it's important to understand your market. Whatever your goal is just to get people to read your book or write a best-selling fantasy novel, you need to understand your readers and your market. Do some research. Figure out what works best in your subgenre. Understand why these best practices work. Analyze the bestseller lists. Read reviews of these books. Look at the way they have crafted the cover and the book blurb. Knowing all this can help you form an effective marketing plan for your book. But it can also help create the book that you and your readers want. There's a reason certain things work in certain subgenres. In this particular case, personally, I will say this really depends, because sometimes a best-selling author may not be, in your opinion, a good author. So take this advice as a pinch grain of salt, because what may work for me may not work for you. And you say, no, this author sucks. I must say, no, this author is great. So again, just my advice will be yes, be inspired by what good authors do. And if a best-selling author comes out, just see what they do as well. But if you think it didn't work out for you, move on. And that's okay as well. So now, it might get a question, how to create an immersive world. We also touched on this, if you remember, because I talked a lot of things. But they see, in this specific, it's so important. The world building is so important to fantasy genre. It's so important. Because it's these fantastic elements that your reader is going to look for. So, you know what you're going to write, and you have been inspired by some of the greats. Now it's time to start bringing your fantasy story to life. And now, just create an immersive world. Of course, now creating immersive world, it's not out of the blue. Again, it's fantastical, but also make sure your nonsensical makes sense in a way that your reader is going to understand. Also, these laws and worlds, etc., and citizenry, the history behind it, etc. No matter what subgenre you're writing, the world you build is the defining feature of your fantasy book. If you don't make it the best you can, then you are starting with the weak foundation. A lot of fantasy readers are here for the world you created. It's kind of a big deal. And so, because now we know that the readers want these very juicy details you're writing, your world, let's just really see what could possibly be the stuff they are bringing. And maybe this will make you remember some stuff. We've touched this in more detail. So, start with your story. We could spend days, weeks, even years creating the ultimate fantasy setting. You can cram literally eons of information into your world building, further until you have continents, cultures, and settings as intricate as your own. But remember that you are writing a story. Your world should be built to serve your story. So yes, in this I have to agree, because yes, I'm very guilty of this, because again, I write details upon details, but then later on while I am editing my stuff, it just comes new ideas, and it can be very, very interesting, the journey. Become a little bit slow, but it's interesting, the journey, nonetheless. So remember that everything is to serve the story and the things around it, the characters, etc., etc. The thing is, create stuff, but probably not in a vacuum, not the thing, it doesn't make sense. Remember, your fantastical nonsense has to make sense, is what I'm going to say. And this is to serve the story as well. Get physical. What does your world look like? I mean, I'm talking about physical terrain, cities and towns. the climate and weather, world beyond the, which your characters know. Also plants and animals, maps and political boundaries, space and the world beyond. Make sense of your own world looks, feels, smells, sounds, even how it tastes while we are in it. Yes, also true. Yes, the physical is very important as well. Again, you are creating a world. Imagine that you are the god or the goddess of your world you're creating. You say, this exists? It does exist. The world, I don't know, the weather of your world is super, I don't know, raining, and it doesn't make, it never make a sun. So be it. Be that. And then on the story, make that work, and then, who knows, you may come an explanation why it happened, or why it was always this way, for example. It could possibly, I don't know. Cultures make worlds real. Unless you just want a pretty backdrop of your story, you need to bring it to life with culture. This means thinking of things like notable historical events, socioeconomic conditions, the political landscape, past and current religions, languages and their uses and traditions. It also includes things we might take for granted, like currency, entertainment, architecture, fashion, and cuisine. So yeah, these elements makes your world richer, isn't it? Again, the stuff that we saw these episodes about the high epic fantasy, which says that have huge in scope. It is, if you think about this, is really massive in scope, like creating a culture, a language, and then people and traditions, religions, etc. This is a lot. But it's these little details that your reader are after, and they're going to consume it until the end. They're going to think, I want to go so much in this that I want to know what's going to happen. Oh, this adventure is in a very forgotten ruin, and there's probably a legend that says that if you go inside, you may be cursed. Let me know how. What is this curse is happening? What's going on here? Is this the curiosity that these little details brings to your reader? And also, of course, because it's magical, bring your magic to life. Whatever you're crafting a magic system, or including supernatural creatures, figure out what makes your fantasy a fantasy. For those living to magic, consider reading out the Branson Lansdowne Laws of Magic. I also have, I think I know this one, yes. Then figure out how those magical elements tie into other aspects of the world. So yes, you can read the Branson Lansdowne's Laws of Magic. I think it talks about soft and hard magic. It is two things that you can explore in your system, magic systems, because it has to have. And then once you figure out what works for you, go forward and let the magic of your world be in the story, and let us know more. Let your reader know more. And lastly, how your characters live. Your plot is driven by your cast of characters, so take some time to figure out how they fit in this fantastic world you have made. Where do they fall on the social ladder? What happens when they go against norms? What cataclysmic events are coming, and what role do your characters play? And this is the stuff that you can create, at least as a beginning, the start of your world building. It's a lot. If you think about it, it's a lot to consider. And just have fun. Don't try to make the perfect world building that doesn't exist. What this is a good world building that people are gonna like it. Because if you start to think, I have to create the perfect world building, you will never finish that book that people really want to read one day. And I need to remind that myself as well, because I'm very guilty of that as well. I know. So, also says here, to construct your god, the goddess, cosmic being, or your world building as well. So remember, when the religion also created the god, the goddesses, or cosmic beings as well. If you want to make more in the abstract sense of Lovecraftian, for example. So my next song is from another, again, game from the same people that made the scroll. Let me see on my things here. Oblivion soundtrack as well. It is Dragonborn for the Elder Scrolls. So guys, let's listen. Dragonborn. Well, this was Skyrim. Here's Skyrim Dragonborn. It is very epic. And it's most of the popular Bethesda. Yeah, there's the company Bethesda. I think I might have tried just the beginning, but then I might have stopped for some reason. I don't really remember. I now remember playing one of the best songs. Games. So my next is actually a very different one. It's like it's a fantasy, but it's more like in a sci-fi genre as well. So it's kind of the middle thing. And it is actually from Warhammer 40,000 or something like that. And the name is Vindication. So guys, without further ado, Vindication from Warhammer 40,000. that was Warhammer 40,000 Vindication. I really like this song because it's so powerful and really brings that dark atmosphere of the dark fantasy. It's just really, really good. So, just recapping a little bit what we've been learning, we start to see that we need to know our market of our fantasy books. As you're going to realize, this applies to any genre, because you need to know audience, you need to know what is out there, but of course then you can give your twists. And I think, well, if you go to let's say a publisher out there, you have to really pay attention to this, because they're going to ask, for example, what does your book can be compared to, just to have an idea what they're expecting. But if you are writing for self-publishing, I think you have more freedom on this part. So all of this is up to you, but please read a lot of books of your genre and know audience as well, and what to expect from that genre as well. So we also start to see how to create immersive world. And we see this just to start the story, just to get physical. And this means, for example, to think about physical terrain, cities, towns, climates, etc., etc. The cultures that makes the world real, and we saw that is about the socioeconomic conditions, political landscapes, historical events, landscape, past and current traditions, languages, etc., etc. And also to bring the magic to life, which is creating your magic system, basically. And then to think how your characters actually live there. So, for example, where they fall in the social ladder, what happens when they go against norms, for example. And now to create a compelling characters, because this may sound, is going to be for every genre, but if you want to create an interesting character, you can start to think about, okay, I have read a lot of The Hobbits, Lord of the Rings. What can I do to make it different, for example? And this is just for you to start to make your own thing. You got inspiration from another good author. Now let's make your own thing. So, you need characters that exist in your freshly crafted world. Characters will help push your story forward and make the reader care about what's going on in that world you worked so hard to develop. So, for you guys to create a compelling character, let's see the specific aspects of it, because this is very important as well. Because without characters, there's nothing else happening in your story. And like we have characters, but if there is no plot or story, then nothing's happening. They both coexist. So, understand what makes a good character. While reading all those books by all these incredible fantasy authors, make notes on what makes characters stick with you, for both good and bad reasons. Understand character archetypes, which feel like they were made for the fantasy genre, and how you can use them to create instantly relatable and recognizable characters. Character archetypes are very interesting way to start, because it gives you bullet points, if you like, to see, okay, if I'm going to choose this X character type, they have to have these characteristics, but let's twist a little bit, for example. You can do this. So, but this is a start. So as it says here, just understand how to create a character and what makes them good and bad. Your protagonist, or it's an antagonist as well. So, while it's the entire example of characters who will make your story memorable, your main characters are your salespeople. Who will be your hero and your villain? What relationship will they have? How will they push each other to change and grow? Even if they don't know each other, these two characters should be like distorted reflections of one another. And yes, these two has to, as it says here, yes, the distorted reflections of one another. It could be that they are projecting something about themselves to each other, for example. It could be that. Plan your character arcs. Every main and secondary character should have an arc of some kind. It's how your characters face obstacles and change from them, whatever by overcoming or failing the characters present. That will define your characters. How does the story influence them, and how do they influence the story? Make living, breathing characters. Boring, Two-dimensional characters are about as much fun to read as eating plain iceberg lettuce. It's a very good term that they use here. Plain ice lettuce. You want your readers to care about these characters, even the bad ones. So use these sources to take your character game to the next level. Well, game or book, of course, if you want, in this case. So, cat interview. Imagine that your character is going to an interview. Character profile. Here for you to describe the character in senses. Physical, personality, backstory, etc. And character traits. So, personality, virtues, and flaws. Now, books that can help you to create your character as well. The positive trait, the negative trait, a writer's guide to character attributes, Flaws Writers, Helping Writers series by Angela Arkman and Becca Pushklidi. And as well, Writer's Guide to Character Traits by Linda and Hensley. So you've got here 2 books to look for if you are interested in. And also, things you have to consider. Of course, it's just like an exercise if you want. You can interview a character and then they give you back and forth responses for you to create a character profile and also character traits. So, your character will be your guides throughout your fantasy world. It's through their actions and journeys that you will immerse your reader in the strange magical place you have created. So give them the time and attention they deserve. And the next part, it is the need for narrative. Because yes, it's beautiful to create stuff, but also need narrative. So, your fantasy isn't a story without a plot. And with the fantasy genre, we can go real big with your plot. Like all books, there are some core elements you need, but we are going to put a fantasy spin on it. And before I send the spin on it, I am going to... this is more like, again, another video game as well. But this is more atmospheric. And I think this goes so well. And the game I'm talking about, it's the Thief Deadly Shadows. I played this game as well many times, and I just loved it for what it was, honestly. And it was the atmosphere that was dark, and you're playing basically as a thief, walking around the streets, and there is political intrigue, and there's the stuff, etc. And if you paid attention, the most part of the Thief series, because there are 3, I will not consider the last one, but that's my personal opinion, they are much more atmospheric, and you can implement it yourself. So, for us to listen now, atmospheric music from the Thief Deadly Shadows, the Hammerites. And this was the Thiefly Deadly Shadow Hammerite soundtrack. I really, really like this because, as I said, it's so atmospheric. And if you paid attention, how you could feel and hear mostly somebody hitting a hammer on the metal. Can you just hear that? It's just what makes this atmospheric soundtrack so cool. And also immerse you into the world of, in this case, of Thief, the world of Thief. My next soundtrack will be on Dark Fantasy as well. And this time, this video game brought a lot of frustration, but very challenging as well. For it was. It's like a rogue type, I think, crawl game, something like that. Dungeon. A rogue crawl dungeon is, I think, what it's called. So much frustration, but so challenging, and people loved it. People still love this, and it is Darken's Dungeon soundtrack. And what a beautiful way, because in this game you could go insane, you could go paranoid, you can have buffs, and I never played the game again, this game, but I just found it so fascinating. People just, just gamers just trying to, play the game and being absolutely immersive in this world. So guys, is the Combat in Ruins, which is called the song. So let's listen. Darkest Dungeon soundtrack, Combat in Ruins. because you feel already the pressure and the moment that your character might actually gain some anxiety and insanity. I'm talking mostly for if there is any gamers out there listening my show. Yes, I know this game can be frustration for many other games as well. Bloodborne is like a frustrated game from what I have seen as well, but very challenging. And I think the most important part of these games is that part of the challenge, is the part of the fun, and these things also. March is coming to an end, and I think I'm gonna just pause our show about the writing and stuff. So on the next week, I'm going to continue on the fantasy genre, and if I see some time, I will then talking about the mystery genre. And that thing, for those who want to know how to write the mystery genre, we're going to see how. So my next song, just to leave this part, is continuing on the fantasy as well. It is from the, let me see here, Dark Souls soundtrack, and it's called the Firelink Shrine. So, for those out there nostalgic of Dark Souls, must listen out the Firelink Shrine soundtrack. And that was Dark Souls soundtrack, Firelink Shrine. Minus one, let's go back to feel happy and heroic. And again, two steps from hell, you can never go wrong with them. With Strength of 1,000 Men. This was Two Steps from Hell, Strength of 1,000 Men. My next soundtrack is from another video game, and it's so adorable. At least the way the art direction went on. It's called Hollow Knight, and the song is called Enter Hollow Nest. For you to have an idea, this Hollow Knight is basically about insects. But they are pale, and the world is dark as well, and there are other insects as well. So I think it's just really so adorable and cute, and people are so crazy about it. So, Hollow Knight soundtrack, Enter Hollow Nest. And this was Hollow Knight soundtrack, Enter Hollow Nest. Just missing a couple of minutes to end the show. I think it's a little pause as well for music. I'm hoping these songs make you feel epic and sometimes nostalgic, sometimes, I don't know, out of these worlds. It felt like you just needed to rest for an adventure, have a epic, long journey as a hero, anti-hero, or even villain, who knows. And I think these soundtracks are very awesome, all of them. Of course, I've got one page of soundtracks here next to me. I've tried just to show those closest to the time because it's too out of show. Of course, I cannot show all of them, but for the next rally, I'll try to show the rest, and there are still some here which needs to be listened. And some you guys might know as well and recognize, 100% you can recognize. If you play some video games, definitely this. There are some piratey music as well, because yes, I have to include pirates because I actually like pirates myself. And other ones as well. One more, two steps from hell.